Thanks very much everyone for being here this morning, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and elders from other communities who may be in the audience here today. I'm also really pleased to be addressing you here at Outlook, because for me, having been out here a couple of times and given an Outlook of one of our members, I've become all too well aware very quickly of the important role that this service provider plays in this community, its role in ensuring community integration and community inclusion, supporting its clients to achieve great outcomes. And if that seems like some sort of party line, let me tell you, I've certainly been witness to some of the work that it does, and I'm really pleased to have been invited, so thank you. My job today is to give you the 5 things that disability service providers, our members, have learnt from their experience of the 7 trial sites, which the 7 NDIS trial sites, which have been going around Australia since July 2013. And of course in Victoria, our trial site is in the Barwon area, straddling the city of Grey, Geelong and Colac. So what have we learned? In no particular order of importance, although perhaps the first one in my view is the most important. Firstly, providers are seeing that NDIS participants, and in many instances their families, will need to be supported early in the planning process under the National Disability Insurance Scheme in order to express what they want and need and are entitled to under the NDIS, and that's for several reasons. First of all, because everyone in this room, or most people in this room, will know the current disability services system in Australia has been described by various people, including the Productivity Commission, as inefficient, fragmented and underfunded. The National Disability Insurance Scheme presents the first opportunity for this sector and people who rely upon its services to actually get the services that are needed when you need them. So so the first thing we've learned from the trial site is the importance of providers under the NDIS supporting NDIS participants to express what they need, what they want, what they are entitled to. These are phrases which people with disability under the current disability service system around Australia, not the NDIS but the state provided one, are not used to using or relying upon. So it's very important that from early in the process, providers are supporting participants to express what they need. Secondly of all, we know from the trial sites that when participants in the trial sites are given the opportunity to say what they need, that's already having an influence on the way that service providers are responding. In the Barwon area, for example, which is where the trial site's been running since July of 2013, we did National Disability Services, this is the peak body for disability service providers in Australia. We did an analysis of the impact of participants expressing choice on workforce issues. And within a period of 12 months, the providers who were the subject of this analysis, as a result of demand by people with disability who were participants, all of them went from running 5-day-a-week services to 7-day-a-week services. All of them went from running standard hours of service from 9 until 3 p.m. to instead starting to focus upon the hours when people with disability were saying they wanted those services, being in many cases from 3 until 6 p.m. And as you'll have guessed from the fact that I said that they've extended their rosters to 7 days a week, people with disability who are participants in the scheme were saying they needed supports on the weekends. So within a year, providers in Barwon, in their experience of the NDIS, had been a change in rostering, a change in workforce demands on their workforce, and responsiveness to the needs of people with disability who are NDIS participants. Another learning that we've taken out of the trials is that disability service providers need to understand as early as possible the implications of transitioning to the NDIS and to respond accordingly. Specifically, disability service providers and those wishing to become NDIS providers need to consider, amongst other things, the price of the services that you are providing and the cost of those services. You need to understand why people should be coming to your service and not another service down the road in what will be an open market for disability services from 1 July 2016. For many in the disability sector, many service providers in the not-for-profit sector, the whole concept of marketing yourself so that people understand why they should actually be using your services and not another provider is a foreign one. But certainly our experience of the trial site is that those providers who can promote what they do well to potential clients, NDIS participants, are doing well in the trial sites in terms of attracting a new client base. It's important, if you're a provider of disability services under the NDIS, that your workforce understands what it is you do and why they are doing it. Because certainly the experience of trial has been around Australia in terms of the provision of disability supports, that where the workforce, where frontline workers understand the importance of the work they are doing, they are better able to promote that work and its importance to potential clients of the service and current clients of the service who may be actually looking around and exercising their right to choice in terms of service provision. And in an overarching sense, it's important as a provider of services under the NDIS, and this is the experience of trial, to understand whether or not your current business model is one which is able to deliver the supports expected under the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and to make changes early to that model so as to accommodate a person-centred, self-directed approach to the delivery of disability supports. Another learning that we've had out of the trial sites is that, in our view, the price for disability services under the NDIS is pretty lean. It's very lean. And we continue to have what I understand are pretty constructive discussions with the NDIA and governments about the challenges that price for services represents. At the moment, I don't want to make too much of this given we're here today to talk about the positives around the NDIS as much as anything. At present, speaking generally, the price for disability services under the NDIS makes limited provision or no provision for quality assurance and safeguards, the back-of-house supports, the training or leadership development, and it assumes that in most cases, labour costs are determined by what's called the modern award. And in Victoria, at the risk of being into too much detail, many disability support workers are in fact covered by other industrial instruments and not the modern award. So there are challenges in terms of the price for services, but recognising the challenges, there are opportunities to work through those and get them right. Finally, the new market for disability services will, in our view, like on the basis of our experience of trial, likely require active intervention and potentially the provision of outreach services through the NDIS, possibly by the NDIA itself in the early years of the scheme. This will be a new market for disability services worth $22 billion, in which many new providers, both not-for-profit and for-profit and other conceptions and ideas of governance, will be operating in from 1 July 2016. In these circumstances, we think it's important, certainly this is one of the learnings from trial, that provision is made for that market to be appropriately regulated in the early years to ensure that some of the most vulnerable people in Australia, NDIS participants, are not taken advantage of and are able to access the supports that they need. We also think there's, and again, learning from trial, we also think it's important that outreach services be established as part of the NDIS in order to bring into the fold people with disability who aren't currently even known or recognised by the disability sector. Particularly, I'm referring to people from CALD backgrounds, culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and also our Indigenous community. According to the NDIA's own stats, apparently about 4% of total clients in the scheme, participants in the scheme, are from a CALD background, and another 4% are from Indigenous communities. Particularly in regards to the CALD statistic, thank you. No, I asked Anne to do that because I knew I'd run over time. Particularly in regards to the CALD background, that grossly underrepresents what we suspect to be the actual number of people with disability from CALD backgrounds who could be in the scheme. So anyway, that's our impressions and learnings from the scheme, my top 5. And I'm happy to discuss them further as the morning goes on. Cheers.
So I'm going to, is that working? Yep. Okay. I'm going to ask David, before he sits down, if he could share with us one rumour or story that you heard before the NDIS got going, or during that time, that you'd like to share with us.
Oh, I'm happy to. And I didn't have to think too hard about this one because I heard it from a lot of people. I admit some of them were our members early on in the process. And that was, the myth or rumour was that the NDIS will be just another funding model for disability services in which nothing else changes. And do you want me to expand upon that?
Yes, please.
Look, let's be straight up. Nothing could be further from the truth. Those of you in the room who are from a provider background or interested in becoming NDIS providers, this is structural reform to a T. This is not just about a new funding model. This is about the way in which we as providers are delivering services, who we're delivering them to, on what basis, and how those supports are being funded. The suggestion, I've heard it from some of our members as recently as this year, I must confess, that it's just a function of how we get funded, and you know, similar or same supports will continue to be provided. That's just rubbish. And the evidence for that, at the risk of being too blunt, the evidence for that can be seen in the trial where people with disability are expressing choice, expressing their needs, and as a consequence, the more progressive providers, including Outlook, I'm sure, and Libby's team at Leisure Networks, are actually responding to that need by providing the supports that people with disability need.
Thank you, David.